What's the best position to squat from? Do you struggle with this in the gym, figuring out how to set up and get to the proper depth and or full range of motion? Maybe you don't know if there's a better way to lift for being really tall or really short. Today we're gonna walk you through 3 things that we like to think about when coaching clients with the squat to help you guys find your own individual perfect way to set up and start your squat. I'm Dr. Alyssa Olenick, PhD in Exercise Physiology, and this is Corey Davis, coach extraordinaire, co-coach at the TLM, and gym owner. And today we're gonna walk you through 3 things that we see most commonly with our in-person clients or our clients online with their squat that help them, that improve it almost immediately, that aren't anything that you need to get super strong for. You don't have to have some, super experience. These are small little tweaks that can simply change your squat from now to your next lifting session. So the first thing is finding your stance. I don't know about you, Corey, but I feel like a lot of people don't know that you are allowed to squat wider than shoulder width apart if you personally need to. They don't know. They think that it's illegal to do that. I don't know if you find that in your gym.
Yes, a lot of rule followers.
A lot of rule followers, which I know if you are one of my followers, you're a rule follower too. And a lot of rules are fake, honestly. We can make things work for you. Everyone watching this video, every client that we have or have had in the past, us ourselves have different anatomy, which means that the way that we are going to get into a deeper squat or at least get to our 90-degree angle or our full range of motion squat might look different. I am 5'1", I'm Eastern European, and I have hypermobility spectrum disorder, which means for me, this is where my body actually wants to hang out all day long. Easy peasy. I've never had to worry about my depth, or I can do that this narrow, right? Now, for some of you guys, you might think, well, shoot, if I go to here, I can barely get lower than that. And so for people who are particularly taller, have longer femurs, and or you might not know what your hip socket anatomy is, but you might simply have less range of motion where your ball and your socket and your hip are meeting than someone like me, and I believe Corey, you have a pretty good range of motion squat as well.
It's okay, but I had to spend like 5 minutes warming up to shoot this video.
Okay, well there's the difference between me. I was born Gumby, Corey warmed up for this video. That is your 30s for us. So when it comes to your traditional squat stance, a lot of people will say, you want to find that shoulder width kind of apart, natural stance here. But for some of you guys, going into that full range of motion might feel impossible, or you feel almost like you're being halted or stuck by your hips there, right? So what I want you guys to do when you're in the gym and you're going through that squat is not be afraid to take a slight step out. If I'm being honest, even though I can squat as narrow as the day is long, I actually prefer this slightly, and this is still relatively shoulder width apart, slightly wider stance when it comes to getting into my squat. The next thing that can be helpful with this too, that I think a lot of people never think about, is your feet, you can turn them out wider or keep them more straight. And there's no right or wrong answer. You probably don't want to squat like this. I am slightly naturally pigeon-toed, so I might be able to do that. But you can keep your classic neutral, straight, 90-degree feet, shoulder width apart. You can take that half a step out, or you can take a slight turning of that, which is just opening up those hip sockets a little bit more, which simply might allow you to go deeper into that squat more comfortably, and or you kind of just have a more stable base from this position. Is there anything that you see, now you work with clients in person a lot more, and Corey does form checks in the Lyss method for us as well. Is there anything else that you see that you are often coaching people through here on finding that stance, just that traditional squat stance that works for them or helps them with that?
No, I think you covered it. I think the biggest thing is the 2 big variables they have at play are how wide are you going to go, and then how much are you going to point your feet out. And as a general rule, I would say the tighter you are, the wider and the more toes out you need to go. Yeah. That's going to create some space at that hip for you to drop down. Yeah. And it's at a certain point, if you get wide enough, it can then be hard to actually get low enough.
Yeah.
So
we don't want to be doing sumo squats.
Yeah, it's not a free thing of like it's just instantly easier. But in general, most of the clients I see when they're like, I can't get low enough, I can't get my hips down, I can't squat, whatever. It's like, take your feet and move them out 3 inches each and rotate out. Yeah. Like that's the answer, or at the very least over the internet, that's my first thing for them to try.
Because it might not be, because you could probably do mobility all day long, right? And you're not going to change the anatomy of your hip potentially, or just the anatomy of some of your bones or the length of your body structure.
And I don't want to have a client not squat for the next 3 months
because they're doing a mobility routine.
While they're doing a mobility routine for 3 months. So it's like, okay, cool. If mobility is an issue, let's work on that. But while we're working on that, widen your stance and point your toes out. Let's still work out.
And this is a great segue into our next tip here. So you figure out your stance, your toe length, but for a lot of people, they have the issue of when you're getting into that squat, you're going forward on your toes. You don't have that ankle mobility to kind of keep the flat feet on the floor, perfect squat that you do. And again, even I, who has amazing range of motion due to a natural defect, I actually never lifted in lifters until I started training at Corey's gym, probably about 3-4 years ago. And I actually prefer to squat in my lifters. I find also a side note, as a runner hybrid athlete with Achilles injury issues in the past, I like lifting in my lifter because it also kind of isn't forcing that flexion. It's allowing me to just focus on the squat and not straining my calves. Unrelated to this video, but for me, that's a personal choice that I made as well. And it's not cheating to use lifters or risers or wedges, whatever you have available to you. And that's what we're gonna demo here. So right now, we just have some 2.5-pound plates on the floor. You can go buy lifters, which are lifting shoes that have a slight wedge in them. You can also get, like, they sell wedges that you can literally like stand on that are foam or plastic or metal wedges that you can get in your gym and have at home, relatively cheap. All of these are perfectly fine. Again, if you're not planning to compete in powerlifting or any competition that involves back squatting, you can use plates or the lifters, and that's totally fine, or the lifter shoes, which you're allowed to use in any sort of competitive ways too.
They're just expensive, relatively speaking.
So again, you want to kind of set these here. 2.5-pound plates are the cheapest, easiest thing to do. I actually just used these when traveling last week. And all you're doing is you're putting your heel on those plates in the stance of what you like. So it's creating a slight angle from your heel to your toe down. And what that's doing, it's just alleviating some of that range of motion that you're having to have at the ankle. So you can focus on keeping your heels driving through the floor and that force going through your legs in the squat and not tipping forward on your toes. It's kind of just removing that variable so you can continue to remain strong as you drive through the ground. So simply elevating on those heels, shortening that range of motion. And you can see I have a wide stance. Even if I turn my toes out, I mean, we can watch that, like if I have my toes in and narrow, I can get down, but look how much easier it is with me with these heels elevated, my toes out, my hips wider, to really get and sit in the bottom of the squat even more comfortably for me. And so those are 2 easy tweaks. Again, you can stand out wider, you can turn your toes apart, and in almost any gym that you're in, you're gonna find 2.5s or even 5-pound plates are probably fine too. That height is mostly going to be totally okay. To put your heels on and create more space at your hip, reduce that demand on your ankle, and allow you to get into more comfortable and strong squat position from there. Anything else that you'd add to that?
Nope, that's perfect.
Perfect. So the last thing Corey's gonna talk about here is choosing between high and low bar squat. Something we were just chatting about prior to this video is that a lot of our clients are doing the traditional high bar squat, which is simply keeping it up high here, rather than a low bar squat, which is when you kind of have it tucked back down lower on your back. And Corey will demonstrate that a little bit more here, or I'll do it for you since it's at my height. And it's something that he was talking about, that when he's giving form feedback to a lot of our clients, he sees a lot of people where a low bar squat might actually benefit them, but a lot of people, unless you come from a powerlifting background, don't even know what a low bar squat is, that it exists, or that it's even an option available to you.
For sure. So if you are lost when we talk about a high bar squat versus a low bar squat, you do a high bar squat. If you don't know the difference, that definitely means you're doing a high bar squat, because that's what you would definitely start with for everybody. Like I've never met anybody in my 15 years of coaching that learned how to squat the first time with a low bar squat. So when you set your body underneath a barbell, you load it onto your traps like you saw Alyssa demonstrate a minute ago, that is a high bar squat. Literally, it is a higher bar position.
I'll just do it while you're talking.
Thank you, ma'am. And so as she does this, what a high bar squat does is it requires a more upright torso as you do it. Go ahead and start squatting, ma'am. Great. Do like 3 reps. That is a high bar squat, and that position encourages staying more upright. You're great. You can rack it whenever you're ready. Thank you, ma'am. Great. That is something that requires a little bit more mobility. If you are super, super tight, which we see with a lot of adults that are getting into this later in life, or people that have jobs where they sit a lot, they're tight, they're restricted, they lack that mobility. And so the low bar squat lets them bend over. So a big thing we see with people in the Lyss method is, yes, oh, you know how to do it.
I can do it, I just don't prefer it.
Yeah. We talked about it before she started filming. Good. Go ahead and unrack it. So you'll notice it's not on her traps, it is on her rear delts. And she is locked in. And now, get a little bit wider, Alyssa. Now, load those hips and squat down. Now you see she's bent over more, and it doesn't require the same mobility. One more rep. Nice, and then rack it. So it's less of an emphasis on her quads and mobility demands and more of an emphasis on her hips. So it's another way you can lift. And the cues are mostly the same. It's just a little bit more about like driving your back into the bar in a way that you don't have to as hard with a high bar squat.
Yeah.
But that looked great.
Connie, you want to come squat?
What a good girl. But that is a super common thing where I see people that naturally as they squat, they get bent over and they really struggle. And because they're in that high bar position, the bar's like rolling onto their neck, it's very uncomfortable. And if they would learn to set that bar a little bit lower, they could then squat in a position that's more natural to them, get down to depth, and then come back up without as much discomfort, because they could just switch to a movement that's more natural to them. Not dissimilar to some people lift better with a conventional deadlift than a sumo, and vice versa.
Yeah.
Some people are going to lift more naturally with a low bar squat.
Yeah, and especially for some of you guys, I know like Corey just kind of demonstrated it there. Sometimes people have that tabletop with their squat where they're coming up and your upper body rises before your hips. Yep. And your squat isn't always going to perfectly be this elevation. It's actually funny, someone slid into my DMs the other day and said, is it bad that I think my hips were rising faster than my shoulders? Yep. And it was like a millisecond, like an absolute millisecond. And I was like—
I saw that video.
Did you? Did you notice it? Were you critiquing me?
No, but I thought, man, if you thought that, you would hate my squat. Because if I'm squatting really heavy, I use a low bar squat where like you do get bent over more. Yeah. And it's like part of the lift to do so.
And it was funny because I was like, man, I thought I was really good with my hips and shoulders, but all that to say, it's not always going to be a perfect uniform rise there. And especially people, depending on if you have like longer femurs or longer torsos, taller people, or just proportionally built different people, a lot of people do struggle with that. Their hips are kind of coming up and they're tabletopping their back. And I find that for some people with that, the low bar squat, which Corey was just demonstrating there, and I'm kind of just hitting it home here, that allows you to kind of get back into that natural position. So you can get more of that alignment of your hips and your shoulders at the same time. Again, a little bit of tabletopping, a little bit of disconnect there, and timing isn't the end of the world. There might be sometimes you can improve that or get coaches to give you feedback to see what might be going on for you. But I have a pretty good squat, and even I have a little disconnect there, which I guess is the main point of that. So, don't be afraid to toy around with something different that you haven't done before. So to recap everything we covered here, widen your stance, turn your feet out, and allow yourself more space at your hips to sit into that if you have a hard time getting into a squat, or it feels painful, or it feels uncomfortable, or it feels awkward. Honestly, for a lot of people, changing either the load that you're doing or just your form can sometimes make things just feel better for you. And if it feels better and allows you to lift more, there's usually no problem with doing that with things like little tweaks like this. The next is simply just elevating your heels with lifters, risers, plates, or any sort of angled wedges is the word that I'm looking for. Slant boards, wedges, whatever that's looking for. Those can be great ways to remove the variable of the lack of range of motion at your ankles, which I think most people struggle with.
Yes.
I would say most people struggle with that. Most of you can probably benefit from elevating that, and it's totally fine and not cheating to do. Again, I feel like this is everybody. The exception is if you do CrossFit and you are having to do it in a Metcon or WOD, maybe you're just wadding in your lifters at this point in time.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the only time I can think of where you wouldn't be able to use some sort of elevation. It benefits most people. And then the last is consider trying a different bar placement and or having like whatever is stronger to you. I think another rant for another day is getting that really strong back drive into the bar. And the squat is, yes, your lower body, but it also is your upper body and your back kind of driving that bar up as you move up. And there's going to be a position of which you're going to be stronger and able to do that either from your traps or from your lats back there. And so be open to or consider, or now you learned in this video that there's another option for you, and try that out. Drop the load. It's a little awkward at first, the first time you do it, but see if that works for you as well. A wider stance and a low bar squat might be the ticket between you and your wonky short range of motion lift here and a beautiful deep squat. Maybe not overnight, but maybe in a few months. So Well, we hope that was helpful for you guys, and we hope it improves your squat. Go try these tips and let us know in the comments below if it worked. We want to know if this actually was helpful for you. And if there's anything else that you'd love to see broken down, coached through, or you just have a question about lifting that you want to have us answer, let us know in the comments below. Otherwise, make sure you hit that subscribe button so you don't miss the next video, and we'll catch you there.